My name is Olli-Pekka Heinonen, and I'm the Director General of International Baccalaureate. And I have now the pleasure to have a discussion with Pedro Martinez, who is the CEO of Chicago Public Schools.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you for being here with one of our schools.
Really been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I think we are working in a field of education where nothing ever gets ready. There are always kind of challenges as the world evolves. Kind of if we start with the idea that what are the major challenges concerning the Chicago Public Schools for the time being?
Sure. And our challenges are very reflective of the entire nation. We're one of the largest districts in the country with over 320,000 students. We, during the pandemic, which was a global pandemic, of course, had a significant impact on our families and students. The majority of our families live in poverty, and the pandemic had challenges for our children where we saw proficiency rates drop. Although, what gave me a lot of hope is even last year, it was a difficult year for us when we were bringing more children back in person. We did have a record graduation rate. Our high schools performed very well, and we also saw more children getting more scholarships, and that was a record level. But with our younger students, we saw proficiency rates drop significantly. And so our focus this year really is to have a strong recovery year. And we put in a lot of investments and supports across all of our schools, including our high schools, to really ensure for that. And our proficiency, we've studied our results, and we're very consistent with the nation. But because we have more children in poverty, we also saw our proficiency rates drop even lower than other districts.
Mm-hmm. Has there been kind of other signs of influence of the pandemic, like concerning the well-being and the kind of maybe the connection with going to school? How has that been?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at the pandemic, our high school students actually maneuvered it in a much better way. And that's why we still saw a record graduation rate. So still, even though many students started working during the pandemic, so they were doing hybrid. They were taking classes, but because some of the classes were online, it helped them on their schedules. But even there, we see evidence that their academic experience wasn't as strong as it was even before the pandemic. So for our younger children, we see the biggest impact. What we've seen also, even outside of academics, is we saw many of our children as they were coming back to school with challenges with their mental health. We saw many of our students who had been exposed to a lot of trauma being at home, maybe because parents were losing their jobs, families maybe also being split apart just because of the stresses of the pandemic. And so we've seen that also play into our school. So we've had to add more counselors, more social workers. We're partnering with mental health agencies. Again, not something that's specific to Chicago. We're seeing this now across many large districts in the country.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of the challenges that the whole world and all the education systems are kind of starting to find the ways to cope with. One of the questions that are a lot discussed at these times is the question that what are really the aims of education? Mm-hmm. How do you see and how do you define what is success? Yeah. From your point of view?
I actually think, even though we've had this challenge with the pandemic, I am just very excited about where I see education going. And by the one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of the International Baccalaureate program is because it's so aligned to this. I think we have an opportunity to really look at, first of all, how we're approaching children. We have been always so used to approaching them through the lens of literacy and math and other core subjects. What I see now is we're approaching children through, not only still focused on making sure that they're literate, making sure that they have strong math skills. We see the amazing opportunities of STEM fields. But with that, also looking at children through their identity, making sure they feel connected to their school. One of the reasons our high schools had very strong results last year with graduation is because we have strong systems where the students really felt part of the school. Right now, we're at a high school right now where I know, and I've been here a few times, where the students feel like they can trust the adults. They feel there's a relationship building that's happening. And that really encourages the strong academic growth. It also encourages them to have higher ambitions. So when I think of success today, we're still always going to ground ourselves to make sure children are doing well academically, but also socially and emotionally. And the other conversation we're having now is how do we expand the opportunity beyond high school? Because we've always had the path of going to college, and I'm still a big proponent of that. I partner quite a bit with our colleges, but it's also, let's look at really a more expansive view, because we have right now employers who want to hire students. They just want skill sets. And so it could be with a certificate. It could be with an associate's degree. It doesn't always have to be with a bachelor's degree. So we're trying to have that conversation and say, well, imagine if education was more like a highway, and you could see the lanes very clearly. And there's on-ramps and off-ramps. So you can come off if you want to go to work. So for example, I might go get a certificate, and maybe I'm doing something in the IT world. I can come off, start working, but then I can get back on and continue to get more courses and get an associate's degree. And so everything becomes stackable, and you can see what the lane looks like. So I really believe that that's something that we want. That's the way I would like to look at education. And that way it's being driven by what our students want to do. And what I have found is that when we can spark their passion and they say, okay, I want to go into this particular field, then they actually will say, okay, tell me what I need to get there. What's the coursework? What are the degrees that I need? Because in the traditional ways we've done things, we help children graduate. We assume they're going to figure everything out in college. And what happens is students that have parents that have been to college or siblings that have been to college, they have an easier time. But then we have students who, they're the first in their family to go to college, and they don't have those kind of supports.
Sure. I think we have maybe a kind of a shared challenge there, that how we can kind of create those other paths to employment, apprenticeship,
Yes.
and that kind of ways. And that's definitely something that we also at the IB think a lot about, that kind of possibilities. So you are also kind of saying that in a way we should not only look for the academic success and the kind of cognitive talents, but also other skills and competencies. How do you feel that kind of the next step and the universities are looking when they are thinking about who they want to have as their students? Are they really ready? And are you having discussions with the universities in this sense?
We are actually, and the conversations we're having. So first of all, even as I talk to presidents of and chancellors of universities and colleges, they're sharing with me they're seeing significant challenges with their students, specifically around these same issues, around mental health, around just needing more social and emotional support. So they're trying to figure that out. So we see the alignment, and so in some ways we share ideas about what's working right now, especially in our high schools, because once they go to college, they're just a couple of years older. They still have the same needs. So we're having those conversations. But the other conversation we're having with colleges is, imagine if we could accelerate and get students getting college credit while they're in high school, and getting them really having a conversation about the different industries, and so that they really can clearly see what those paths are. I think it creates more motivation for our students. The difference also in high schools, we have a lot more supports because we have counselors, we have other staff, and so we're talking about how do we create much better handoffs, so that students see this as a relay race. So they're with us in high school, they're already getting college credit, then we pass the baton either to the community college or to the university, and it's a much easier transition. And then what's great is it creates conversations among institutions to say, okay, how do we make sure that these courses are relevant for that industry? And then I'm sharing with them, look, I have students that are ready for some of these courses. Let them go and take them in institutions, and then they can complement with IB courses. They can complement with other courses, and this way students can really see how education is helping them shape, really frankly reach their dreams, versus I'm just getting a degree and then I'm gonna have to figure this out, when I go to the next institution.
I'm hearing you talking also a bit of a kind of a different educational leadership approach? Because I'm hearing you talking about kind of a role of a system convener. That do you feel that you're having that kind of an identity as a leader, that you are kind of bringing the different actors together?
I think we have to. One of the things that I'm a huge advocate for higher ed institutions, both community colleges and universities. Frankly, it changed my life. I was the first in my family to finish college, to start and finish college. And it completely changed my not only the trajectory of mine, but also my family members. And so I want our children to be successful in higher education. We know the best careers are going to be, they're aligned with education. And so for us, when we can bring these institutions together, some of them are very large, very complex. And it's great to me when I talk to them and we talk about, look, we have the same desires. We want our students to be successful. We want our students to reach their dreams, because when they graduate from our institutions, they're going to be, our best, ambassadors, for our institution. So they want the same thing. And it's interesting to me when we can see the challenges even before our students finish high school. We can see how difficult some of these institutions are. So it's great for me to convene them and say, okay, let's have these conversations, how to make it easier. Then they're sharing with us, here are the struggles we're having. By the way, these are your former students. So for me, sharing that information, breaking down those barriers, I think it's essential today.
Yeah, very good. We had students interview Professor John Verveikki from the University of Toronto, and he was telling that through his research, he's seeing that we're living in a kind of a meaning crisis. And by that, he means that people have lost connection to what is valuable in life in many different ways. I had the pleasure of visiting one of your public schools today, which was also an IB school. And what I was hearing was a very strong connection with the community around. Would you like to share more of that approach, and what is it from the students' point of view?
Sure. So first of all, one of the things I love about, our international baccalaureate programs, they always have a component of students, looking at their surroundings. Even though there's an international view and we look at a global view, it always comes back to how does this, what do you see as you look at your own community in the context of a global view? And what I love is that it creates the opportunity for students to not only think about where they want to go in their lives, but to think about what kind of impact do they want to make in their communities. And so even though we have challenges with many of our children living in poverty, many of our children being first-generation students, the asset that comes with that, or the amazing, the value that comes with that, is they have a perspective of, if I am successful, I want to give back to my community. And our schools really, that's part of the identity of our children. That's part of, as we look at, how we approach education today, it's reinforcing that, because when we do that well, these are students that are going to come back. Some of them will work for us in our schools, which I love. So we see more of them coming back as teachers and wanting to be part of our institution. More importantly, they come back to want to become leaders in the community. And really, isn't that the goal of IB? Isn't that the goal of our institutions? It's not just to help them, pass their courses. It is to really for them to think about, what is their role going to be in society? How can they be leaders, and how can they be impactful to make a change? And so that's what makes me excited about the way we're approaching education today. I think it's very different than the way I grew up, in education.
Yeah. How are you feeling about the challenge that there is also kind of this idea that that the change of or the pace of change is so fast that we, the older generations, we cannot anymore kind of imagine or are able to anticipate that what the challenges for the young students will be when they are getting older and building their future.
Absolutely.
And some people are saying that that you have to have an entirely different kind of approach to education. You cannot kind of mend what is today.
Yeah.
What is your view on this? Do you see that we have the ability to change the systems in a way that we can still give the competencies that the young people will be needing?
I think we can, and I'll tell you why. You know, in education, we tend to be our biggest critics, ourselves. You know, because we see the challenges, we see the struggles. Even with the challenge we had with the pandemic, it really magnified that. But when I think about where we've come in the last 20 years alone, in this country, we have changed and raised standards. We have a much bigger emphasis on math and science. And what I love is we also, in our district, we're now even having a bigger emphasis on the arts as well. And so I believe where education has evolved, frankly, we're at a much stronger place than we ever have been, even 20 years ago. What I also love is that, you know, when you look at the fact that you and I didn't grow up with technology, or at least we didn't consider it technology at that time, our children are growing up with technology. And it is amazing to me how, as we continue to implement more technology in our classrooms, and some of our teachers, you know, they get nervous, but we're not seeing that with our students. They adapt very quickly. And for me, you know, the challenge then becomes, how do we continue to just support our teachers so that they are confident in their instruction? They continue to be facilitators, because there's so much information available to our students. And so I see the opportunities. I see the opportunities for us to have complex conversations with our students about what's happening in society, where technology is going. And if we can develop them in that way, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. And then we just have to work with our higher ed institutions so that we have those good handoffs. So that if I have a student who I know has the potential because they want to go into engineering, or they want to go into computer science, or they want to go into medicine, we provide those proper handoffs. And for me, getting them exposed to that coursework early, getting them some of that college credit early, increasing their chances of success, aligning our systems. If we do that well, even as things are changing so fast, our students are going to be fine. It's really more us as adults that we just have to, you know, kind of just go with it, because it's not easy for us. Because, you know, I still find myself, you know, that even though I like to think that I'm a little more tech savvy, but I'm not. You know, so I need sometimes my 8-year-old and 12-year-old to help me with it.
Sure. Very good. We are celebrating the Festival of Hope, and it is kind of the idea that at these times hope is something that is needed, and not only kind of wistful thinking, but hope as kind of action.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you that kind of 2 questions. That how do you see that? How well are we acting in our schools so that we are enabled to bring that kind of hope as a verb, as an action in place and as part of their kind of competence? And what gives you hope?
You know, for me, what gives me hope is actually what I'm seeing in our schools, in our classrooms. My best way to describe this year, as students were coming in, they were full of hope. Our teachers coming in were much more full of hope. That wasn't how they started last year and the year before that. It was a significant struggle with the pandemic, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. Frankly, you know, we lost community members. We lost even a few staff members to the pandemic. And so that was a significant toll for us. And I think we're still recovering from that. And then, of course, it shows up in the academics. But what I see this year, a much more sense of optimism, a much higher sense, and they do have a sense of hope. And what I am also seeing in the classrooms is I'm seeing more joy that's coming. And so we're reminding our students of why pre-pandemic, why it was so joyful to be in school, to be with your friends, to be with others, to socialize, as well as learn and learn together. That was a struggle during the pandemic. We lost some of that, and so I am very hopeful, and I think our results are going to show that this year.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us start our journey with the Festival of Hope here with Chicago Public Schools.
Thank you for choosing us.
Thank you.